Rwanda and Uganda. What was the interest of the other two countries, Angola and Zimbabwe?
I had a Sudanese friend. I told him an Ethiopian proverb about the fallen tree getting many axes. He told me we have a similar Sudanese proverb that said a slaughtered bull gets many knives too. When you have a nation in crisis, problems within it, of course outsiders also come to get a piece of the action. Many of the countries in the area, Rwanda, Uganda, Zimbabwe, Angola, almost 9 countries. It was called the first continental African war because they all came to take part in the looting. In Zimbabwe wanted to get, the Zimbabwe generals were getting contracts. Other nations were involved in the illegal mining. So they all came in to participate in the looting. So part of it there's some element of wanting to do good in terms of defending people, but there was a good portion of it also involved in stealing and in involvement in what they call now resource wars involved in exploiting the rich Congolese resources, and that's what got them involved in many ways. In fact, the United Nations and the international community condemned the outsiders in wanting to intervene at the expense of Congo.
That's for they were doing this for their own personal interest. Now, in 1990, Laurent Kabila promoted his son, Joseph Kabila, to the rank of Major General. This was, caused some rift in the army. Then, when he was assassinated by his bodyguard, his son, Joseph Kabila, became the head of state of the Democratic Republic of Congo. His style of government, he has a different style of government. And also, he started to make some progress in bringing about peace in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Some of the troops that belong to other countries like Rwanda and Uganda were disengaging and leaving. What can we say about the reign of Joseph Kabila since he took over power?
One observation they make of Joseph Kabila, as you pointed out, is that he wasn't as flamboyant and as corrupt as his father was. And one indication of that early was when they wanted him to live in the Marble Palace, big, huge palace made by Mobutu, that was occupied by his father, Laurent Kabila, as soon as he won the war and he was the new democratic leader, but he still took the dictator's palace. They asked Joseph to go into it and he refused. He said he didn't want to leave. That was one indication that he wasn't as corrupt as his father. And also he genuinely wanted to make change in the country from what they described. But sometimes it becomes too big given the culture of corruption and impunity in the country. So some of the things still persisted: the corruption, the mismanagement, the cronyism. In fact, the IMF was making an auditing of the expenditures they were given, and they were found wanting, but they didn't want to push it because to create instability in the coming 4 months. There's going to be an election. They had a referendum approving of the constitution. So there is hope, because that's the only choice people have, that things will be better and Joseph Kabila would be better than his father. But like he said, part of the cronyism Laurent Kabila continued from Mobutu was to make his 29-year-old son, the youngest son, a major general, and they even tried to create other conditions for him. So many of the things persist, but given the calamity and the problems that confront the country, one can only hope that things could be better.
Yes. mentioned about the approval of the new constitution by majority of the people of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And in that constitution, they lowered the age in which a person could be president from 35 to 30. And then Joseph Kabila is 34 years old. And he is an aspirant. Again. Do you think he will have the support of his people? You have stated, you know, how he has demonstrated his that he is not very much interested in the luxury of power, in the pleasure that accrues from power, like his father was. His father was like he was heading towards that palace built by Mobutu, because as soon as he got there, he went in there. It looks like that one was one of his targets, one of his visits. But his son has demonstrated, you know, a kind of moderate type of presidential life. You think he's going to win the election? You think the election is going to be free and fair, because they're going to have an election in March?
Yes. The challenge now is, here you have a country as big as whole Western Europe with all the resources and potential, and yet you have poverty and mismanagement. You have, in fact, they say the Congo is the nation in the whole world which had the highest number of people killed by conflict, by civil war, the last how many years, few years, about 110 years or so. 3 million people have died from the direct effects of the war and related to disease and famines. And this is hidden because they say Congo is not in a strategic position. So there is hope that somehow the country would hold together. You have still the rebel groups, you have militias fighting each other. The many non-governmental organizations pointed to the tragedy of Congo being the place where the country is awash with arms flowing from all over the world, where you have the marriage of mining groups, companies that sell arms, involving atrocities carried out by numerous rebel groups in different parts of the country. So the hope is that somehow the country will hold together. But there is a lot of work to be done, because they say the UN force, there is about 17,000 force army trying to ensure the country from spiraling into even more violence. But they say that's not enough, because you have 15,000 for small nations like Liberia. Such vast area, 17,000 is still small. So many criticize that the world has to be engaged in the Congo. Criminality, businesses, arms supplying, warlords, enormousness. This is all a big problem for the Congo. But somehow it is hoped that maybe a semblance of governments could be brought into an institutionalized form and bring stability and decency to the country.
Now, the Africa, you mentioned about the involvement of the international community in order to help Kabila bring about stability in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I wonder how the presence of African Union is felt. Is there any pressure coming from African Union? We know that African Union's presence is felt in Darfur, in Sudan, and in Liberia. But in the Democratic Republic of Congo, with 7,000 United Nations peacekeeping force, that will not help to bring peace. Plus, recently, they were attacked by Congolese troops, killing 8 of them and losing 15.
Yes.
What is the signal for this?
Yes, because it's such a huge country, endowed with so many resources. You have all these countries playing their wars in them. The Lord's Resistance Army was reported recently it's making its incursions into the Congo and killing innocent civilians. So this has happened, and the African Union has not been that strong a union to be engaged in. When you have soldiers from El Salvador and Pakistan in the Congo with the 17,000 people, you would think the African Union could assert its power there and bring stability. But if they get involved, it's to get involved in factions. You have Zimbabwe on one side, you have the Eastern African countries on the other, and being part of the problem rather than being part of the solution, where they don't get involved in bringing stability, but pushing for their own factions, for their own militias, for their own rebel groups, or in support of government officials that might give them contracts or make them part of the looting. So that's been the reality of the Congo.
But what I'm saying is that there has not been any concrete deliberation by the African Union.
Yes.
I know what they did in Liberia and what they are still doing in Liberia. And I know quite, well, what they normally do in cases like this is that they ask other African countries to keep away from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And then they will bring in ECOWAS. I mean, ECOMOG. Well, ECOWAS would come in, but ECOMOG, you know, would come to help the United Nations peacekeeping force. Yeah, because I mean, I'm not saying that they are going to just jump in there. That'll be deliberation. They will arrange for conference, a kind of meeting between those African countries that are involved in the fighting and in the violence. But one thing that Joseph Kabila is enjoying is, even though they are opponents, but there is no outstanding, you know, confrontation between him and opposition. You know, opposition exists quite all right. I mean, that somebody is after him personally, after the presidency. So there is no infighting, you know, among the troops. You know, I think there was a time also it's rumored. But what I'm saying is that he seems to have some measure of control over the troops. But the problem is from these troops from African countries. That is why I'm saying that the AU should have organized a meeting, you know, and then a resolution would have been passed for them. They have done it before, to stay away from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where ECOMOG then would be drafted in.
In fact, they say if it hadn't been for international media exposing the things, they don't even mention it because Congo's case is hidden. They say horrible as the conditions in the Sudan were, for example, the degree of death and devastation in the Republic of Congo is much higher, much higher. 3 million people. Oh, what country do you have in the world where 3 million people die in 8, 9, 10 years time? That is one of the few cases where supposedly peaceful times you have that, but the African Union doesn't even mention it as a big issue. You know, yes, they don't, because they're more interested, like they're the previous African, the OAU. They call it still it appears to be more like the OAU, which used to be called the Club of Dictators. You know, where they're more interested in their power than in what they could do for their nations and for the continent as a whole. So they still have to step up to the plate and get involved in stabilizing Congo in a real way, addressing, leaving aside their particular special interests, you know, that get them involved in terms of their own private national interests and in the larger vision of the nation and the continent. That's yet to happen.
Yeah, but another surprising aspect of the Congo problem is the nonchalant attitude of the Western countries. It seems to be unusual when you have such large arsenal of mineral deposits. You know, normally they get interested, you know, when there is question of oil,